So good morning. Thanks for coming. It's 9 o'clock, last day. So you either had a lousy party last night or you're really interested to seeing that. So it's both ways fine. So I would like to start with a question. So we have done that a bit in a hybrid mode, depending on who you are and what you're interested in. So who of you are customers? End users. So who of you are partners? Who of you are competitors? Okay, so great to have you here as well. We like to speak a bit about what we have done the last 3 years actually on our internal project, how we evolved our practice, how we try to reshape a bit of a SharePoint practice to a one which we used to have, how we see, and got asked by Microsoft, how we see our business will be like in 2-3 years, where this is going to change to, so what SharePoint Wave 15 or the new product is going to bring to us. I wanted to skip the next slides normally, but I was in a taxi this morning with a lady who has her office in Jersey right to the KPMG office and who had no clue about where we are. So they say, I know your logo, but that's all I know about. So short introduction, I'm going to do that together with Thomas and Alex. Thomas is our lead architect for SharePoint in Germany in the Microsoft advisory team, and Alex is in Microsoft Services we work closely together with, who's helping us developing a jointly method which we're going to roll out with MCS, with Microsoft. And yeah, I'm running the Microsoft advisory team in Germany. So real quick on KPMG, and I don't want to bother you with more than 15 slides on that, no. But just to give you a bit of an idea on what we were facing in our internal project and what the complexity of that was. We have roughly around 150,000 people, so we are a bit smaller than our lovely competitors here, and they are more successful and looking better than us. And so the problem we have is it's a partnership. So if you are not aware of what KPMG is doing, it's legal stuff, audit stuff, tax, consulting, advisory. But we are not like one big shop. We are not an Accenture. So it's partner-driven. So what we are facing is two issues mostly. And that played a bit back into the complexity we had with SharePoint. These partner teams work in a way like the partners are their own company. Of course, they work together, they go out, deliver together, they go out, hunt together, but at the end of the day, they have their own teams. And especially in audit, we have to see that we have issues that those teams are not able to talk to each other. If we are in transaction service projects, they are not allowed to talk to each other sometimes. So it's fairly hard, and we started that journey 10 years ago with a project which was called K-World, which was 150,000 user knowledge management. And doing knowledge management in that environment is nearly impossible. So we kind of say, okay, that was shaped down to a global intranet. We had all that, which was great, and it's still good working. But what we were now facing was that with the new people coming in and the people coming from the universities, coming from competitors, coming from system integrators, from smaller companies, and say, if I look on your IT architecture, what is that? You switched off IAM. How should I really have to write emails? No, I don't want to do that. So we had to kind of rethink about what we do. And we don't only have one project. So we have colleagues here from the US who do a massive SharePoint rollout. We have colleagues from global who do global services. So our intranet sometimes is provided globally. Then we have local companies. And in that spread, we are a fairly small, tiny company, so this is this small country in the middle of somewhere in Europe. We're not that big. We are only 8,000 users, but it's a couple of offices. It's a bit of revenue, and it's not that small, but it's not an entirely big shop. So the complexity is not about that project only, but the complexity is about that we have to work together with our global team, with our other countries. Europe is way more integrated than maybe if you work in a Chinese, in one country environment. So we closely have to work with 8-9 other countries who all run their own data centers. So there's a lot of hints and a lot of problems. on the IT side. The interesting part for us more was what did we face with our users, and what does the users want to have from us. So we have chosen SharePoint not by strategy, honestly. So we started like everybody else 4 or 5 years ago, did some team sites, did these, did that, and was organically grown in some areas. The problem we had with that, there was no strategic overhead about that. We don't really had a strategy on that. So we had document management tools, we had our intranets, we had our extranets. So I think a lot of you have done that same journey. So what we did was a hard full stop at the end of last year and said, okay, we're going to redesign that from scratch. We don't want to run that as an IT project once more. And we want to do it like we do it for our customers. So we do a lot of those projects strategically with other customers. But now let's do it ourselves. And we launched an all-up Wave 15 project with nearly Thomas is going to talk about that, the entire stack of what's available today. So we went into the TAP program for SharePoint 2013 early. Did a local rollout in a few offices, worked with that for a while, and now do the rollout early January, hopefully. And the core things what we have seen was the product brings a lot, but the evolvement, we could have probably done 90% of what we are doing now with SharePoint 2010 also. But where we now really get good feedback and where the users and the communities get good feedback to us is what we now do is really having an integration process which is way more concentrated on the user again than rather doing a SharePoint IT rollout project. And this is something where we had a long story and a long lesson learned, and where we invested a lot together with MCS into how to do it right, and that's what we want to talk about. So a bit about the challenges, maybe before I hand over to Thomas. Of course, we are probably different to some of you guys because we are really mobile. So if our people are in the office, our IT is not our biggest problem. So we have a different problem if the people are sitting in the office. So we want to have them out at the customer. And still always online, and this was one of the big things still we had in a debate with the Microsoft, with the product groups, was always online doesn't work for us. So sometimes it just doesn't work by connection, but sometimes it's not working that we're just not allowed to go online in client environments. So the whole offline thing was a big issue. The collaboration thing under our regulations, we are under are hard to deliver. So we had a lot of Chinese walls, we had a lot of user restrictions where we had really hard regulatories. And the other thing is that, of course, and then maybe that's a bit different to what your audience are facing here in the US, is we are an SAP shop beside Microsoft, and this is to 90% of our customers are doing SAP for their HR, for their FI. So there was a huge need of SAP integration. So handing over to Thomas, he's going to tell you a bit about how that project works and what K-Smart is, and just to share a bit about the journey we went through and about what we are doing and how we do it. And then he's handing over to Alex, who's going to tell a bit about the methodology. And we would love to share with you if you have projects running and see, okay, maybe you're a bit too much on the IT path with that. Would love to share with that. And then, of course, at the end, it would be great if we can get into a discussion on your problems and your issues you're facing at the moment. Thomas.
On KPMG, so that we now can focus on our SharePoint project, on the introductory project. This is a project name at the moment. It's not an official name within KPMG, but what we are going to do is we design something like a smart information management for all the employees, for all the guys that are working on the projects within KPMG. So what we have seen in the last years, that we have some problems to get something like a connected workforce. So typically, we have some problems with integration of mobile devices. So we have all these BlackBerries, we have iPhones with a good app, but it's not the integration we want to have, not the process integration. The people would like to have that they are out in the field at the clients. And it goes with it, the direct process support on project deliverables. So we have this team sites, we are using SharePoint 27 and 2010, but often we do similar projects. We have the same deliverables that we need in the project. So we want to have something like a process support on the projects directly from the environment in which we are working, which should be SharePoint 2013. So we need a transparent versioning of object. We need an efficient way of collaboration on content. We need a powerful search through the projects so that if you have worked on different projects, you can find the objects you need driven by search on all the containers where the work, all the deliverables are in it. And we see that there are often problems because the systems that we are working in are do not have the kind of performance we would like to have. So sometimes not everybody sticks to the rules and fulfills the requirements that we have to fulfill on our project. So these are kind of deficiencies we have seen in the past when we are working on project, but also at our clients, at our project, when they were working with the standard tools. So what we see on the right is just the way the people worked in projects. So they have all the systems. They have SAP and different other legacy systems, but the connecting point was always the employee. We do not have something like a smart integration of all the systems working together. We will see it as an example project later on, which we define as the first and the primary use case we are setting into production. So we are focused on SharePoint as a solution platform to work on, and the problem on the user-facing side is often it's just another tool. Do I have to use SharePoint now for everything for which I used former just a file server service, something like that, and it's not feeling for the users that the tools help them to fulfill their work more efficiently using this tool. So it's more what Jens already said. It's not that we are providing SharePoint as a project, but we have to identify use cases where SharePoint is used efficiently. That's the point here. So that we need a clear definition how SharePoint, how the functionalities are used within the projects. And as a result of all this, often SharePoint projects come out as a large investment for the companies without creating the benefit that SharePoint could deliver to the organization. So at the end, it's often a short-term action. So we place SharePoint in the organization. The organizations use SharePoint, but there is no long-term vision using it, for example, as they're just replacing file server services in the organization. So what we talked about was more the user side, but when we look on the IT side of the problem, the SharePoint introduction projects are often just IT projects. There are no organizational projects because you have to change the IT organization to support SharePoint in a way that you really unleashes the workforce to do their work as most efficiently as they can do it with SharePoint, and therefore it's no IT project. The organization often do not change their change management process when they introduce SharePoint. You have to focus on it if you do it because you have to introduce new change management processes because you are introducing a complete platform on it. It's not that you only have a team site as a product here to deliver to your users, but you can build apps on it, and you have to define a way how to handle this, how to bring all the products you deliver on SharePoint through a complete life cycle. What we also have seen at some customers is when they do not host SharePoint on their own, but they have a hoster for it, they do not do it on-premise, then they often have something like a restricted provisioning of the product. So by the contracts they have with their hoster, not all functionalities can be used by the organization. And this can lead problems because you cannot use really the full functionality SharePoint delivers to you. what we also have seen is that they don't always implement a complete lifecycle management on SharePoint. And this means not only a lifecycle on the information objects you store in SharePoint, but also on the applications that run on SharePoint. So often it's only about setting it up, deploying it to the platform, and then it runs forever. But you have to think about how to retire the application at the end of their life cycle, how to deal with the information that is processed in the application, that is stored in the applications. And these are things you have to think about right at the beginning to have a complete and efficient lifecycle process on everything that lives in this platform. And as a result of this, often we see that there is no clear governance, and there are often compliance deficiency as they are not consistent retention rules, for example, on the information objects living on the platform. So are you sure that you have deleted everything you should or you could delete after retention time, for example, which is in Germany typically 10 years? So you have to define clear policies that work on the platform, and you have to guarantee that these policies are set efficiently in the platform. So these are common challenges we are facing at all the clients' projects when they work with SharePoint. So what KPMG in Germany is doing, that we are really on a fast track to wave 15, because as we said earlier, we already have SharePoint in our environment. We have around 145,000 users on SharePoint 2007, which is highly customized. We also use SharePoint 2010 in our environment, for example, for collaboration spaces with other clients. But what we really did the last 10 years and more, we optimized the way how we deal with structured data. We have a very efficient SAP system. A lot of processes are really implemented very good, so that this side of the story is fine. SAP works really good. But what we now need is a better way to work with our unstructured data, which typically is more than 80% of all the information that we have in an organization. So we need to define processes, and we have to provide tools that social computing becomes available for all of our employees in an efficient manner. So that's what we are now focusing on in our project. Not to introduce SharePoint, but to introduce a platform to really manage unstructured data, all kinds of unstructured data in the complete organization. So we have something like two major systems, which is SAP first and SharePoint as second. And if somebody wants to have an application and wants to go around both, there have to be good arguments not to implement it on SAP or not to implement it on SharePoint. Depends on which data is in it. So this is the point where we started. So SAP is great, but we have to focus on our unstructured information because that's the way we work in the field. So we have a strategic decision that we really start on the newest available version that we have. So we will introduce SharePoint 2013 in the beginning of next year, but we also switch to the newest version of the server operating system, to the Exchange, to Lync versions, and we also want to introduce Windows 8 Phone for a very integrated way to work together on the platform SharePoint. So, well, I think this is the line of aggregated buzzwords from the SharePoint 2013 introduction slide. We have to aggregate the content in the point where the people are working, so at the project sites where they work. They have to have a good search, they have to have social computing functionalities at that point where they are working. We want to deliver generic and also business-relevant applications through the platform which are completely integrated so that they have a single point for a project where they can access everything, all the content they need for the project, and also all the interfaces they use to provide something like monitoring information on the project. So, well, I think that's the most important thing, that we are really focused on this part, and maybe we should have done it before. As Jens said right in the beginning, most of the functionalities we will be using in the first step are not new function for SharePoint 2013. So what we did in the project is, at the moment as the first bits of SharePoint 2013 became available for us, we started something like a dev environment with SharePoint. We set up some showcase environments with Windows 7, Windows 8, right at the moment when these products became available for us. Windows 8 is at the moment in progress, how to integrate it in our platform. And we use these showcases to show all the stakeholders on the project, okay, this is something like a vision, how we could work if we introduce all the projects. And we started on really some basic functionalities, just some collaboration on files, on information objects, some document management functionalities we used. It's really basic features that were there already with earlier versions of SharePoint. But it helps us a lot to give the people a feeling about how this future workplace can look for them. So this was a base layer for us on the project to get the people involved in how we can deliver SharePoint. But we also have an infrastructure side that we are focusing on, because, as Jens said, we have a global IT. They are providing a lot of services for us, and we have to work integrated with the global IT, and only those systems that we really have to host nationally, we want to host in our own data center. So there need to be something like integration of all these different levels. So we have a national on-premise IT, we have a global IT, and we have the idea of a KPMG private cloud where global can provide services to all the national organizations. What's done on this level too is all the constraints and the capability management the platform can provide to the users. They do something like an asset and application demand management. They do not provide SharePoint as a product to the users, but they provide the capabilities the business needs to set a use case together, which then is applied to the sites, to the places where the people work on in projects. So what this layer provides is it's the software, it's the infrastructure, it's something like a platform that is enabled through the national organization of KPMG, through global KPMG organization by global IT. And what we do in a second step is we look which applications are needed by the business. So we do something like an assessment of the business demand that we have in the organization, in the different functions of KPMG. They provide the requirements that are given for the use cases, and our enterprise architecture can handle these requirements and balance it with the capabilities that are available by the platform. And this interactive way of providing use case solution provides a very agile way of deployment, because we have the capabilities already on the platform level, we set it together, and at the end we directly have use cases provided on the platform for our case for SharePoint 2013, and it's something like a scale-out architecture, that use case by use case the platform grows and the resources are managed in this layer that are needed to operate the platform. So there are these two steps, and we will find these two steps again at the methodology that we are using to introduce SharePoint 2013. Alex will focus on it later on in this talk. So, as I said in the beginning, formerly we used something like file server services to organize the project where we had constraints that we have to handle the data in a national data center. So that's for us a good starting point, because we can start almost from scratch with our architecture. So what we are providing are kind of divided for two topics. The one topic is our platform, that we want to provide a scalable and user-friendly SharePoint environment, which is kind of cloud-ready. So we want to be compatible with all the capabilities Office 365 provides, so that we have something like a guarantee to stay in a rapid way of adopting new version of SharePoint, because we know as long as we stay kind of compatible to the cloud versions of SharePoint, of Office 365, it helps us to adopt new versions of SharePoint. So we want a fully integrated SharePoint environment within KPMG Global, and we have an environment that is complying with all regulatory requirements globally and locally. So this is the SharePoint side. We also have an infrastructure side, so that we want to manage this with System Center, that we have something like a resource pooling strategy and all of this. And why we do this really in a directly the right way is because we want to provide something like a blueprint for KPMG. So what we do in Germany can be reused in every other country that has the need to implement SharePoint 2013 on the SharePoint side and also on the infrastructure side. So I think this is a nice way to provide additional value to KPMG globally and to the other countries. So we said that we have to do some changes in an organizational way. So we have to introduce a SharePoint Center of Excellence nationally for Germany. And in this Center of Excellence, all these interactive operations are done with the business to define the capabilities, to get the user requirements. We have the lifecycle management, and every other SharePoint-related thing is really done in the Center of Excellence. In our project, we started to set the Center of Excellence up, and we had some use cases that we find in our organization that we have already implemented, and it was done in our vision project on SharePoint 2013, on the use of 2013. So what we also found is that we already have all the connections into the business. So we have our functions, audit, advisory, tax, we have the central services. And we find within KPMG Germany is that we have guys in all the organization that are connected with IT. So we only have to talk to them to get the business demand that we need to set up the use cases here in the Center of Excellence. What we also have is an integrated way to develop and to code all the applications we need, because the Center of Excellence is connected to can be connected to something like a global preferred supplier, which can be, for example, MCS. But we also integrate local delivery partners, and by providing something like a manual, a guide, how they do the development, we can guarantee that even if we have local delivery partners, they follow the guidance that we give them so that we get a solution that we really can deploy on our platform without hitting the regulatory requirements that we have. This was more on the business demand side, but what we also have, we have something like we have to integrate within the complete organization. This is, we have to align with the target operating model for our IT, how to align with the IT strategy that is given globally. We also have to align with organizational changes that we have in the organization, in KPMG Global and Local, and we also have to support a general cultural change of work that we are facing, especially with new employees coming directly from the university and what they expect as their tools they work in. So as a result, we do not only have this exchange between the demands, the strategic alignment and the deployment, but also we want to provide more additional benefit to the users, and that what we are providing is something like a marketplace for applications that can be deployed directly by the user, a corporate marketplace. We want to introduce something like an innovation portal so that if an application is in development, it can be seen there. So if you see that there's an application built up at the moment and it doesn't fit completely to your requirements, you can interact with the Center of Excellence so that they change maybe a bit during the development of an application so that it can be deployed and it fulfills your own requirements. What we also would like to set up is a workbench for the user with compliant modules in it, so that there are something like easy pieces, building blocks, where the user can set up little applications in their sites. So something like modular building blocks, and as a result this can be deployed directly by the user without any process in the Center of Excellence, where it can be deployed automatically without any manual interaction in the Center of Excellence. So this is a big picture how we want to operate it and which we are implementing at the moment. So what's the result of it? What we will see is that we will have Windows 7 and Office 2013 as the next user desktop, user experience. we will have a fully integrated project lifecycle. So if a project starts, the sites collection are directly rolled out in alliance with SAP. So the project starts in SAP, and there's a trigger, the site collection is rolled out to the user. We will see this in a use case, how it really looks when in the interface of SharePoint 2013. We will present some screens later. So what we also want to use is we want to utilize all these SharePoint features that are already integrated. For example, task management, project monitoring. There are a lot of functionalities, capabilities in SharePoint, and this we want to use. We want to bring them to the users. What we also have is that we want to provide something of pre-configured content enriched environments on projects so that the people do not get an empty site when they start. But if it's a special audit project, they get all the information already implemented in this site. So they have a pre-configured, enriched environment right at project start. And what we also need, we will need an integration of all the legacy systems that we have in the environment. For example, SAP input fields on the worked hours a day and stuff like that. So what we see here is nothing else like an integrated single point, entry point for the employees on the projects. So as I said, right in the beginning of the project, we start to identify our use case, and this is something like a high-level view on what we really want to implement. And this is, we want to implement a better collaboration with our clients, which is complying with all regulations, where we have access for KPMG and the client side, and they can share and collaborate on the information objects. We'll have approval steps like 4I principles on object before it goes to the client. What we also want to have is we want to include cross-system workflows so that the workflow starts at the KPMG side and runs through the client-side IT systems. I think this will provide a very large benefit for special functions for us. What we also want to implement is a better knowledge sharing. This means that we want to provide relevant information to the project teams when the information is generated. For example, if we have news for a special client, this relevant news should be already published in the project side for the project teams that are working with this client, just as an example. We also want to provide better team spaces or partner spaces so that not all the knowledge that is shared went into personal mailboxes, so that we really have something like a permanent collaboration space there, which is used intuitively, and I think this is a very benefit of SharePoint 2013. And we also want to provide better community spaces for our specialists across the world, so that we have penetration testing sites and not penetration testing mailing lists, for example. Just as example, what we identified as use cases in our organization. So this is our first use case we implemented. The challenge was that we replaced the third-party file services with SharePoint 2013. This is, as I said, completely integrated in the process lifecycle realized in SAP, and it should be something like a blueprint for the KPMG future workplace on projects. These are some technical details, and as I said, we are just replacing one legacy system, one file service system. This is not these are not numbers about unstructured data at KPMG. It's just one system. So we had a lot of project containers in the system, more than 100,000, more than 1,000 new project containers each month. The file size varies really. So you see, we have project containers with less than 1 megabyte and other ones with more than 500 gigabytes. So this is really challenging if we migrate all the systems into SharePoint. We have a total amount of data in the system of 40 terabyte, and as I said earlier, and Jens too, we have to comply with all the requirements as a global advisory and auditing firm. So what we see here are just some screens from our proof of concept that we did during the summer. We have something like project sites directly where all the engagements are listed. All the permissions are set automatically from SAP. So if you're a manager on a project which is in SAP, you get also directly the permissions on the SharePoint side. You are put into the relevant groups that you have. So we have set up the groups, the permission groups that we need on the project, the managers, the partner, the staff, or some group without any permission. But this is completely controlled from SAP. So there's no manual process in it. If in SAP the project is started, the site is rolled out automatically. We have something like enriched content right at the beginning. So when you start the project, you will find all the stuff you need to do the project. What we see on the right is the integration of the metadata from SAP. So if you're on a project, you don't have to go into SAP. You will see everything you need. And this is a workspace where we have a collaboration with the clients, who is outside, and this is just one example on the task overview, which is just used to provide something like milestones on a project. Well, I think this gives you some insight on what we did during the summer with our proof of concept and all the things we implemented already in our organization to really do the SharePoint 2013 rollout beginning of next year. And I think now comes an interesting part for you too, because we don't did it on our own and only on our experience from former projects. We are following really something like a methodology, how you have to introduce SharePoint, how you introduce social computing in collaboration in big organizations.
Thanks, Thomas. I want to talk about a little bit about the methodology we have behind that and why have KPMG and we done this project like that. So the methodology called Impact, and it's a proven consulting approach where we don't really focus, which is new for MCS to be honest, on the technical parts, but we really focus on the benefit use, on the benefit-oriented use for SharePoint. So instead of just looking for platform infrastructure and development stuff, we really hardly focus on strategy. So build up a vision and strategy before starting, then build up the platform, go to the needs and benefit of your end users, not of the IT stuff, just on the end users. And then we're also facing the organizational change which you will have within an information worker project or with SharePoint in your organization. We have partners with Open System Network, Microsoft Services. We have the University of St. Gallen in Switzerland in there, and KPMG Germany. So how we came to this method. We started with the University of St. Gallen and done some case studies with these companies. So different sectors, different sizes, and it was really important for us to see if there's anything where you can say, okay, this is a proof or this is a point where you can say, okay, your information management platform will be successful or not. And what we came out with were these factors where you can say, okay, when you know that they are done, an information management platform will be successful or not. Here, and they should be green, but they are blue here. You have success factors. If you've done them really good, your project will be more successful. If you've done them not that good, you can still be successful, but we think you will pay a little bit more money or need more time for that. So, for example there, the conception. If you've done a really good conception in the front, you will probably be more successful or faster successful, but you can still find the right way during your project. So it will make you more successful, but when you don't have it at the front, you can still be successful. The same with the approach. Good approach, more successful, bad approach, you can still find your way. The red things are so-called barriers. When you don't do them, our results show that you will be failing with your information management project. So this is really key to focus on them. For example, rules and requirements. If you don't set up rules and requirements for your information worker, you will definitely fail. Based on our results, we see that if you don't focus on them, most of the time people don't know how to use SharePoint, what they use for, and also not if they are like looked on when I put data on there, which perhaps in draft mode, am I responsible for that or reliable for that? So you have to set up rules and requirements. Also, one point I want to focus on is the basic infrastructure. It's really important that you have a good basic infrastructure set up, because, I mean, think on one-time data loss. As soon as you have a data loss due to technical reasons, no one will trust your platform anymore, no one will put data anymore on that. So these are the points we found with our case studies. And so what is important for us and what we see getting at these case studies into a methodology was you have to position SharePoint as an information management platform within a company. And when I say this, I don't mean SharePoint as a toolbox. I mean, there are lots of stuff in there, like metadata service, navigation provider, all that kind of stuff. But to be honest, all these functions will not help your information worker be more successful. So, as Thomas said, for example, document management system will not help you to be more successful. Document management is more a function. You need a use case or user scenario to be successful with that. For example, this project sites. If you just set up a document management system, people will use it like a file share and you will not get any benefit out of that. So it's really important that you have a specific user scenario, a specific use case to focus on and to give this use case to your employees and not SharePoint or not a document management system or not, I don't know, whatever you will call SharePoint. So the toolbox will not help you. Because of this, we started with our approach to do projects, and we started with, we have two phases. One is the explore phase, where we have generic user scenarios with which you can try out SharePoint. And we start like you choose one of our generic user scenarios. You set up an O365 tenant, and we implement a deployment-ready template on that tenant for you for prototypic use. For prototypic use, because we can get really quickly into a working model, and Office 365 gives us a reliable infrastructure where you can really work quickly on, and you don't have to focus on building up an infrastructure really long in your own department. With this generic user scenario, you can get to know, and your end users can get to know, and your business decision makers can get to know SharePoint on a scenario base. So they don't click around and look on all the functions SharePoint gives you. They just use some functions. They will need it in the scenario. This, what we found out, it's more practical for all the end users than clicking around in SharePoint. SharePoint is just too huge to just say, okay, here's the SharePoint, try out what you want to do with that. You have to like focus on a scenario or on a use case. With this, we show the business benefits and build up a vision, as we had done this with KPMG. We build up a vision for your SharePoint environment of how you will work with SharePoint in your environment. Then we identify specific use cases where we haven't thought about in our generic user scenarios, or we see where we have to do changes or adaptations with our generic use case so they can fit directly to your organization. The second phase, and that's the longer one, to be honest, is the exploit phase. Because based on your experience with SharePoint in the explore phase, we go and prioritize your identified use cases. We go and define an information architecture based on the impact. We implement physical and logical architecture according to impact, SIP, and I will come to that later. We have two process models behind that. We implement also not only like the technical infrastructure, but also corporate services. So the competence center of KPMG really is one of the ideas to set up an infrastructure, and I don't mean a technical infrastructure, also like the community and stuff. Then you implement the use case we identified according to our second process model. I will come to that later. And we support with this the organizational change and the adoption. And I want to get a little bit more deeper insight into the exploit phase. Based on your vision, you build up, as I said, your basic infrastructure and your basic services. Then we start with our first process model, and it's just like a scribble of that, where we have like project phases and different streams. And as you see already, we have a big part in organizational adoption, because we think that when you implement SharePoint in your organization, you just don't install it. It's not a setup Excel implementation. It's really, you have to get your organization ready for SharePoint. Then we have project management as the second one, and technical implementation as the third stream in that. So we focus also on that, but not just on technical implementation. Having done that, we'll have a corporate change management process in place, and your infrastructure will be in place. And by SharePoint infrastructure, as you see, I just don't mean only the technical infrastructure, then also like processes, communities, center of excellence or competence center. It's really important for that. Then we start implementing use cases. You see this. You see now the methodology, how we do this also with KPMG. We set up the use cases, and there comes the second process model in place. And to give you a little bit more insight into those colored bubbles and what they mean, all of these colored bubbles are deliverable into the project, or at least a checkpoint. Because sometimes you don't need like an offline concept. We have also an offline concept in there. Then you just say, okay, I don't need it, but will not forget it. Let's say it like that. And behind all of them, we have like a recipe or a summary where you say, okay, what is the goal of this deliverable? What's the roles have to be in that deliverable or to get the result for the deliverable? We say how to get or how is the best way to go to that result or to the deliverable. And we give you some templates and resources where you can fill it out. So I mean by that, I don't mean that a non-technical person can set up a highly technical infrastructure. That's not what I mean by that, but it's just like it gives you an overview of what you have to do, and also who has to do this, so you can focus on the right person for the right job. For example, skills and change management done by a technical person will probably not work the same as a non-technical person will set up a technical infrastructure, would just not work. So having done that and having set up your use case, your infrastructure will extend by the extension you develop on it and the processes for the use case. And by that, you grow up your SharePoint infrastructure and your SharePoint communities. Summarizing the methodology, you start with a reliable infrastructure, which really helps you to save your investment into SharePoint, because you know that your information worker will trust the platform when they're really good done. We also focus and starts by utilizing the productivity and accelerating collaboration by encourage your information worker to form information communities or SharePoint communities. By that, it also opens, in my eyes, the way of social computing, because you really set up the communities on SharePoint and you can like work with them. And in the end, you create solutions that help your business users, because you focus on the scenario, not the functions of SharePoint, which really helps you. And with that, I will hand over to Jens, who will talk about the partner opportunity.
Yeah, thanks a million. First of all, we want to make your life a little bit easier. So I've seen a lot of you taking pictures, so you photographed a lot of nice German screenshots you don't understand. So we will have a version of that available. So if you leave your business card, we are happy to send you a version of the PowerPoints, and some of them you can obviously reuse. So we have to put out some of the internal project slides, but most of the methodology part you can get. And also we get asked, we're going to do with Alex and with the lead architect in MCS, the chief architect of Microsoft in MCS, a tech workshop, a web session in December, where if you leave your card, we get you an invitation, which will be more on a tech level. So if you are more interested on the metric behind it, on the scaling, on the how is it set up, the question and answer, so that it will be a tech session, which will be a link briefing in December, and happy to have you on there. So all in, we got asked by Microsoft to talk a bit about the partner opportunity and about that changed and how we changed with that. So we have done roughly 120 to 150, nobody knows it really, SharePoint projects over the last years. The group who did that mostly came out of the ECM, the document management, the knowledge management. When I still had Hair, it was called archiving and workflow and document management industry. So those guys had a lot of experiences in rolling out large-scale information worker infrastructures and moved to SharePoint over the last years. So what we had out was, at the end of the day, we find out 3 design principles for all of the projects we have seen which were successful. And if you do that many, there are some which run good, there are some which doesn't. And if we recap the projects which didn't work out well, honestly, maybe if we ignore the SharePoint 2001 projects, which we did, most of them which didn't work, it was not the fault of the product. Most of them died in the trenches of communication. So, and that's the very first design principle is there's a lot of technology work to be done, there's a lot of technology infrastructure to be done, and that might change in the future a bit because if we might going to get some infrastructure as a service from our data center providers, we might get something from Microsoft, but there still will be a huge amount of tech work to be done. But please don't treat your SharePoint project, if you have more than 50 users, please don't treat it as a tech project. It just does not work. And this does mean not only, okay, get overwhelmed with a lot of consultants doing fancy charts. It's really about the adoption and the integration. And that's not just about picking up the user, that's mostly about picking up your management. So the big thing is we have seen large SharePoint projects where when we then went to the CFO or to the CIO or to the, if they had a CIO, he was usually involved, but to the CFO or the CEO of the company, he had no idea what they were doing. He had no idea of what SharePoint is doing. And there's 2 things which work. And that's probably the principle number 2, where we said, okay, is you can roll it out on 2 bases. One of the most successful projects we've ever done was a 30-country rollout for more than 100,000 users on SharePoint. The customer internally probably today still doesn't know that he's using SharePoint because it's a global Sarbanes-Oxley infrastructure and a telecommunication company. It's doing its job. It's a business application, and there's SharePoint behind. And that's okay. So it's totally business-driven. So if you have a use case, and if you have just one use case, and if you say SharePoint is the right tool for that, what Alex said, it's fine. And it's fine that it's not a SharePoint project. But if you roll out SharePoint as an infrastructure, if you say, I want to have that in place, and I think we can learn a lot of what our people in SAP did over the last 20 years. They did one thing right. They set in place an infrastructure which had the top-down backup of the management and say, okay, you don't implement SAP like, okay, let's set up a server and we do a bit of FI, or we do a bit of HR, or we do a tech project and provide an infrastructure. It has to have a strategic background in the management. So find an executive sponsor, have a rollout concept where you say, okay, there are use cases who are beneficial. Otherwise, and we have seen this, all we do and we go through at the moment is not new. If you go back to the years when I still had Hair, which was called, then Lotus Notes was successful. We've seen a lot of Lotus Notes projects, and we have that internally. We have that saying is don't build Lotus Notes 2.0 in projects. And we have a lot of those where you have 600, 800, 1,000 applications on SharePoint, which are all siloed, which are all fractured, which are driven by the departments, and where you don't have a common sense of how you build that and how you integrate it. Those projects usually die. That's the lessons learned, probably, what we have seen. The big thing and the big change, what we are facing at the moment, is with SharePoint 2013. There's a lot of nice functionalities where you say, okay, they fixed some problem, they did some things right, but there's one thing which really is changing how the projects behave, how we can integrate with the customer, and that's the app model. That's the model how you can build applications. That's the model how you can deploy applications. So dividing SharePoint projects in 2 areas to say, I have an infrastructure which works, and if you're a bigger company, you usually have your IT service provider who's doing the infrastructure as a service, but then use the app model to give autonomy to the departments, to say, okay, you can define your apps, you can define your capsulated business app, give that back to the IT department. It's really, really better now. You can outsource work. We have a lot of this development work done offshore or nearshore because you really have capsulated models now and not just customize your SharePoint to death. And that's a major change. And for us, that was primarily, we took a bit of a risk adopting SharePoint 2013 that early, but that was the model rather than going with 2010, which is a brilliant product, and just do customizing and custom development, which is really, really hard to control over the years. Use that app model. Major thing. So a lot of you are, and we get that a lot in customer roundtables or in partner roundtables, a lot of you are afraid, and this is especially the smaller ones and the smaller SIs or the smaller partners, on what does the cloud, what does Microsoft services like Office 365, what does that bring to us as systems integrators or as partners? I think it brings one thing. It will all make our lives easier, and I think it will make it easier to run long-term successful projects. So we've seen a lot of projects which were really, really, really unhealthy on an architectural level because they were not settled strategically. They were grown from one department into a company. So with having cloud services available, with having Office 365 available, you can rely on a really well-built infrastructure from the very beginning and then do your first application in a customer, and if it's only 10 users, on a really well-baked infrastructure. So what we see at the moment and how we change at the moment, or how we changed our business as well, is the deployment of SharePoint. That's probably might go down. It is the way it is. So installing SharePoint service is probably not the investment I would do for the next 10 years or the next 5 years. This is definitely going down on service revenue. What we see at the moment, the big and the really big opportunity is on embracing the app model, on building the app, focus changing to building apps and implementing app models at customers. So 99% of the customers we talked to, they had a brief talk on SharePoint 2013, but they haven't got really the power and the idea about what does the App Store model in SharePoint mean, how does SharePoint apps work, how can we use infrastructure which is probably not hosted by themselves, but do app development on a department level. That's definitely changing, and that's really, really good revenue you can do at the moment. And if you emerge into an ISV type of role and really say, okay, I have apps which are standardized, and build recurring revenue. That's probably the most interesting part, but that's the most challenging also. But I think what we see what's going down on classical SharePoint install and deploy a SharePoint business is more than picked up at the moment by high level or more value consulting business on building infrastructure ideas about how to build it in customers. And there's a lot of customers who take it seriously. So just a brief word on how we changed with that, and then that's at the moment away with KPMG in Germany. We totally gave up on system integration ourselves. So we don't do any coding, we don't do any implementation ourselves anymore. We all outsource that to Microsoft partners because we said they are more agile, they do that better, they have better technology people. We have one team now which is out of IT architects, which is out of tax and audit people who do the regulatory work, and out of lawyers, put that together into one team, and they build the core infrastructure, they build the core design, they build the core architectures for projects, they do what Thomas was and Alex was talking about, but we don't do any implementation work ourselves anymore. And I think this is something, if you are a partner, and there was about 50% partners in the beginning here, I think it's a good way to move to more on the architect's level and on the design level, rather than really trying to knit and code everything yourself. Because there's other companies, if we want to compete, and even if we are a bit bigger, if we want to compete against the big offshore companies, we will be lost. We cannot be that agile, we cannot be that fast. And this is the same with smaller systems integrators. We have seen there's a lot of, we just acquired a company and they had a brilliant SharePoint infrastructure, and they have a great provider who did a brilliant integration in the business, and they could have done that and coded that anywhere, but they have the designers and the architects in there, and that's the people who will stay in business, I think. So on a summary, do the right plan. So that goes back to the customer side. If you're rolling it out, if you want to do SharePoint 2013, use 2013 as a catalysator to do it right this time. There's a lot of changes. If you do a migration job from 2007 or 2010, or if you implement it on the new way, don't just do another IT project. So really move towards an organizational project, moves towards a business project, which integrates your management and your business. Find the right partner. Of course, this is not just about getting the right technology resources in. It is important to have people who know the product, who know how to code it, who know how to adapt it. But there is something beyond you need, and which is probably the third and the fourth one is don't forget the users is always a good advice, but in IT projects often a big mistake. But the most important one and the most important success factor, as SharePoint projects evolve and get bigger and then more strategic, show early wins, show early showcases, get something out as a demo portal, get something out as a showcase or whatsoever, but show something. Don't go dark and say we do a 2 years project. That was in every external project we did, and also in the internal projects, really, really important. It's not good to kick off now and then show results in 12 months. That's just not really working well. So we have some time left, and happy to take your questions, and thank you for being so brave staying through that early. And again, if you want to have some of the slides, want to have a follow-up conversation, don't want to have questions now, that's fine. Just leave your card. We get in contact with you. But want to open it up to questions and say thank you to Alex and Thomas mostly. Questions?
Actually, you mentioned the integration of task management and some of the projects basic to the SharePoint 15. Are you using also Project Server?
But are we
using Project Server?
We use Project Server for the internal project management. We use Project Server to integrate it in SharePoint to the project tasking in big project rollouts. So we have project portals where our client service teams work with, and they have Project Server to do their internal project management, yes. By people or by rooms or so there is about in Germany at the moment there's a team of 5 to 6 people who are the core architects and who are the core design leads for that, and we have a couple of partners, Microsoft partners, then architects in there who do on certain areas who do the come in and go out and do specific work. But it's the core team probably is, if you have between 3 and 5 people in there, you can do a lot with that. Good point. So we have a group who's doing transaction services, and at the moment we have that. Don't have that in SharePoint at the moment. That's one of the building blocks, or one of the applications we build at the moment is exactly the secure data rooms to communicate with customers and in transaction service areas. Yeah. So I didn't get it.
How do you discern your expert? How do you let the users get on board your services?
Well, at the moment we haven't decided how to do the authentication for the external users. If we use something like a federation sign-on, and at that point we're evaluating at the moment.
So for us the problem is not the technical. There's a lot of organizational issues, how to onboard external users and then how to make them secure to work in our internal network. So the most things are at the moment discussions with legal and risk about that. So we don't with the are with the technology part here.
I don't know if I misunderstood the slide or not, but is the company mostly in 2007 right now for the slides of 2020 because you're going in 2013?
So if you say the company Germany is on 2007 entirely at the moment, and we moved to 2013 skip it. Globally, we are partly on 2007, partly on 2010, and the roadmap is to 2013 within the next 12 months. I got the first part of the question, sorry.
What are your plans for working together in other center of excellences in other countries?
So we have a global IT organization who's about setting that up at the moment. And we try, and this is what we did with lessons learned with other customers, we try to have one board where the lead of the center of excellences work together. But again, this is at the moment on a global level, it's on a fairly early stage with the project. So for Germany at the moment, what we have done is in that center of excellence, we have a supervisor board, which is all the practices who they are reporting into. And on a global level at the moment, we have global IT sitting in Montvale at the East Coast, who's setting up a similar thing. And then we try to get them integrated with the other countries.
And we have the processes to integrate local and global IT, and that the people work together. So it's not the first time that we do it with SharePoint.
On what?
For the structure of data.
Yeah.
Did you manage, do you have an implementation how these two data collections interact? What kind of product do you use to do that?
So we use a generic interface to access the metadata we needed for the proof of concept on the project sides. So that we pulled all the SAP data out of it that we used in SharePoint as metadata. There was for us the proof of concept that we already implemented. So we are for other integration, for deeper integration, for example, the hours you work, the input for it on the employee side, we haven't implemented it at the moment. So the main interface to SAP data is still SAP.
So we have, on the project side with clients, we have done a lot of projects which were Duet-based or based with Citroën or Windshuttle or those folks who integrate SAP and SharePoint. But that's more than really for transactional integrations where you say, okay, you want to write back. At the moment, this is really feeding SAP, feeding SharePoint with SAP data. That's more a monorail at the moment.
But on the roadmap, we have the integration.
This is basically the delivery team who does Microsoft projects on a consulting level at clients. So this is grown over the last 3 years. And again, it's not a system integrator. We don't do system integrations. It's about architecture. It's about compliance advisory and regulatory advisory.
So it's more customer-facing advisory service.
Yeah. Any more questions?
Well, one more. It's about the links. What services and links do you use? Do you use something? Do you do conferencing?
So for Lync at the moment, we are not on Lync yet because of our global infrastructure. We are at the moment on the pre-version of Lync. The pilot we are running at the moment is voice integrated as well. But at the moment, there is a roadmap for Lync globally, and there's one in Germany. So this is going to take us some time to really embrace Lync fully. So at the moment we are on a non-voice track. Any more questions? So, thanks for your time. And again, if you want to have the slide.